Okay, I think we're on. So let's start. I have a short clip that I would like to show. It's about 10 minutes and it's really a reference to the comments that came up last week on the Atheist Experience, where an awful lot of stuff was presented suddenly from like nowhere on physics, on cosmology, the Big Bang, that kind of thing. Physics came up quite a lot last week. And I made a reference in last week's episode to 3 different models that come out of Einstein's general theory of relativity. I'd like to give a slightly different view of that. I'm going to shut up now and start the video, because the video will be, I think, hopefully self-explanatory, and I hope that we have enough time to watch this before the Atheist Experience starts, and I hope that you will find it interesting. So here we go, let's get into it. Okay, last week there was an unusually large number of comments on the Atheist Experience associated with physics. There was a lot of cosmology, the birth, the life and the death of the universe. And this week, before the Atheist Experience begins, I thought I would give some information over about the ideas that we talked about last week on cosmology. One of the things that came up was the model of the Big Bang. Which model could we use? There was various models referenced in the program. And one of the things that I said as an addition is that if you use Einstein's theory of general relativity, there are lots and lots of constants that you can tweak the values of, and you can produce different types of universe where space-time is different. You can do different things. But it turns out that if you want a universe that kind of looks like our universe, as much as we can judge at this point, then there are only 3 options for you. And I said in the program that those options kind of boil down to an issue of density. The density is either very high, very low, or at some critical value, which I described in the program last week. Okay, what I'd like to do this week is show you a clip from a course that I used to run at university. And it basically explains this aspect of the 3 different types of universe from a slightly different perspective, from the perspective of the shape and the properties of space-time. And it's all about geometry.
What is geometry? The geometry that describes the universe and everything in it. Well, it sounds a silly sort of question. You know, what else could it be other than straightforward, common sense Euclidean geometry? For example, if you have 2 parallel straight lines and you continue them on to infinity, then they would always stay the same distance apart. As for triangles, well, the sum of the angles of the triangle all add up to 180 degrees. And it doesn't matter what the shape of the triangle is or its size, you always get 180. As for circles, well, the circumference of the circle is 2 pi times the radius r. And again, it doesn't matter what the size of the circle is, you will always get 2 pi r. So that's Euclidean geometry. But there are situations where that kind of geometry doesn't work. And suppose, for example, you're trying to circumnavigate the globe. There you're confined to a curved surface, and Euclidean geometry doesn't work there. If we're to set up a geometry for this kind of surface, then obviously we need straight lines to start with, and obviously to some extent there isn't a straight line there, they're all curved. But if we choose as our definition of a straight line that it's the shortest distance between 2 points, and suppose we have 2 points, one there and another up there, then clearly there must be one line there which will be the shortest distance between those 2 points, and in fact it's this line here. It's a line of longitude. And in general what we find is that between any 2 points the shortest distance, the straight line, is the arc of a great circle. A great circle being one that lies in a plane that passes through the center of the sphere. So all these lines of longitude are technically straight lines, and so also is the equator. So we've got our straight lines then. How about parallel straight lines? Well, yes, we can take any pair of lines of longitude, let's take that one and that one, as they cross the equator, because we know that that angle there is 90 degrees, and so is that one there. So these two lines are parallel. So let's now extend those to infinity, or at least as far as we can get on this surface. And obviously what happens is that those two lines, they don't stay the same distance apart as they did before. They actually converge and intersect there at the pole. So that's the first big difference between geometry on a sphere and geometry that is flat. How about the triangle? Well, I've drawn a triangle on here. We need three straight lines, so I've chosen two lines of longitude, this one and that one, and for the third side I've chosen the equator. Right, now looking at the angles of that triangle, clearly this is 90 degrees, we've said that before, and so is that, so add those two together and that gives us 180. But you know, we've still got to add in that angle there, so whatever that might be, it's obviously going to end up more than 180 degrees, the sum of the angles of that triangle. In fact, that is true not only of this triangle, but of any triangle that we draw there. It always comes out to be more than 180 degrees. All right, if you have a very tiny triangle, an absolutely sort of tinsy-wincy little triangle such that it covers an area which is more or less flat, then the sum will come out to be roughly 180 degrees. But it will still, strictly speaking, be a little bit more. Right, thirdly, what about a circle? Well, let me draw a circle on here, and to make things simple, let's just draw it to be the same radius as we had here. So we'll take the pole as being the center of the circle, and I swing this round, and lo and behold, the circle happens to be the equator, right? So the equator is the circle of radius r that we had before. So now let's just compare the circumference of the flat circle of radius r with the one on this surface. Well, as you see, there's no comparison at all. The circumference of the equator is obviously much smaller than we've got here. And of course it has to be when you come to think about it, because you know, this radius is curved. And that's what one finds with all circles that we draw on this surface, that the circumference comes out to be less than 2 pi r, because remember, this is what is 2 pi r. So that is what we call spherical geometry. And as you see, it's very different from flat Euclidean geometry. But even that doesn't exhaust the possibilities. Now, suppose, for example, we had a surface like this, the kind that a horse flea perhaps would have to learn how to negotiate. A saddle shape, or as we sometimes call it, a hyperbolic shape. Well, again, the first thing we have to do is to identify straight lines. And again, we use the convention that it's the shortest distance between 2 points, so that gives us some straight lines. How about parallel straight lines? Well, there are a couple down here. That one and that one. They are parallel. And if we follow that through, well, you see that, again, they don't stay the same distance, and neither do they intersect with each other as they did on the sphere. They diverge. So that's a big difference from the sphere. Triangles, yes, I've got a triangle over there, and as you can probably judge without measuring it, that the sum of the angles of that triangle are going to turn out to be less than 180 degrees. All right, now you might think I'm cheating a bit, because you might think, well, he's actually only got one decent straight line there. The other two are curved, and he's deliberately curved them in order to make the sum come out less than 180 degrees. But actually, that's just a trick of the perspective. If I swing things round a bit, you'll find that straight line begins to look curved, and the line on the left now begins to be the one that looks like a straight line. So what I'm saying is that you must be very careful not to go by appearances and stick by the convention that these lines are the shortest distance between 2 points. And so, okay, with that triangle and any other triangle that I draw on here, the sum comes out to be less than 180 degrees, whereas on the sphere it was more than 180. Finally, how about a circle? Well, let me again draw a circle on our curved surface with the same radius as we had originally, and we'll take the point here in the middle as being our central point, and well, as you see, I've already drawn that circle in there. This is the circle, and so what I have to do now is compare that new circle with our flat one. If I just clip that in there, I think you'll agree that's a pretty good fit, that side. So let's swing the whole thing around and see how it fits on the other side. As you see, it doesn't. There really is a big difference there. And again, I'm not cheating. If I take our radius, you'll see that it really is a circle of radius r again. And as you see, it turns out this time to be very much larger than the circumference of the flat circle. So what this means is that on this surface, the circumference of a circle is greater than 2 pi r, whereas there it was less. Right, now you may be saying, well, why bother with all these different kinds of geometry? Well, the point is this, that it could well be that Euclidean geometry does not apply to the universe. Now, I glibly started off by saying that these two lines, if stretched to infinity, would remain the same distance, but how do we know that? You know, we've never actually ever stretched lines to infinity. As far as we know, if we actually did the experiment, we might find that they intersected like they did on the sphere, or diverged as they did on that hyperbolic surface. As for triangles, well, yes, if I measured these angles, I'd find that they come to 180 degrees, as precisely as I can measure it. But this is a small triangle, you know, compared to the size of the universe. And we saw on the sphere that if you had a very tiny triangle, then even there you would get roughly 180 degrees. What would happen if we had a huge, an absolutely gigantic triangle? Suppose, for example, that's us on our galaxy, and we had another observer on a different galaxy, and yet a third one over there on another galaxy. And suppose each of us took lines of sight to the other two galaxies and then measured the angle between the two. And then somehow we pooled our results and added the three angles together. What would we get? Would it be 180, or would it be something somewhat larger as we got on the sphere, or smaller as on the saddle? We don't know. We haven't done it. And as for the circle, okay, it's roughly as close as one can say 2 pi r. But again, if we had an absolutely huge circle, what would we get then? We don't know. In fact, we do not know what the geometry of the universe is. It's one of the big problems of cosmology.
Okay, and it still is one of the big issues in cosmology. Okay, that was presented by a guy named Russell Stannard. Russell Stannard, I will put information from the origin of that particular clip in the notes. I'd also point out the following. And here is one of the numerous books that Russell has produced. If you haven't read any of the Uncle Albert books, then they're quite interesting. They're meant for a younger audience, but they're still quite interesting. He's also written, as you can see, one of the Oxford University Press very short introductions. I know that in the Atheist Experience, sometimes Matt will refer to the Templeton Prize. Actually, Ronald Stannard has been awarded a Templeton Prize in the past, in 1986, in fact. I'm now going to stop this. I'll put a comment in the notes to reference some of Russell's books. Hopefully he will not be upset with me about using that short clip for teaching purposes, of course. And we'll get to the Atheist Experience, so I'll close this now. Okay, and let's just move me in. Now, I'm keeping my eye on this because there are issues, as I think I mentioned, if you watched last week's episode. Every time the music starts, I get copyright issues because of the music, so I want to try and avoid that, and I have a way around that in the future, which I will be working on over the next few days. Anyway, there's a couple of things that I want to mention as a result of that. First of all, that was again Russell Stannard. He's a member of the Open University. The Open University, I'd like to give a plug to them. They are the largest university in the UK, and they are primarily, they aimed their university degrees at people who were working. So you did it part-time. I was one of their lecturers for a very long period of time. And basically their students were people who had a full-time job normally. So they're holding down a full-time job, you know, getting up in the morning, going to work, getting home at night, dealing with the family issues, and then in the evening, you know, like 9 o'clock onwards, you'd find time to try and now study for a degree. Those people are crazy dedicated. I have met very few people that will, as a student, will work as hard as an Open University student. Absolutely crazy, work hard. And you have to do it in your own time. It sucks up your weekends. You can't do it in the same rate that a normal student, a conventional student, can do it. So in the UK, a first degree normally takes 3-4 years. The standard has become kind of 4 years. A few degrees like medicine, architecture, that kind of thing take a little bit longer. But in the UK, the typical length is 4 years. You can't do the Open University with ease that way unless you are actually not working and you can do it all day, every day. So normally an Open University degree would take maybe 8, 10, 12 years. And that level of dedication is like crazy. And I take my hat off to every Open University student because they are amazing. If anybody's interested in that sort of thing, then they are masters of distance learning. They are truly the masters of distance learning. Absolutely incredible. Their materials are outstanding. And you get assigned a tutor, and it's and it sounds like I'm kind of plugging for them, but if you're thinking that, you know, a degree is beyond me now because, you know, I've moved beyond the student years and I'm now at work, it is not, and you can take it at your pace. So if you want to check them out, then check them out. Again, I'll probably put a link below in the notes to this post. For the Open University, if anybody's interested. If anybody wants more information, they can always put a comment in the chat or in the comments of the post, and I will answer them or put you in touch with somebody because I still have contacts there. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to mention, that that's where Russell is from. The second thing I'd like to mention is that this idea that space-time we're using that word space-time now as if we all know what it means. The easiest way of thinking about what space-time is to imagine that the universe is within a fabric. In fact, Brian Greene has a book called The Fabric of the Universe, or the Fabric of the Cosmos, and it's about this idea that space-time. Now, in physics, when you try to explain things, it's generally really difficult to explain three-dimensional aspects of anything, because we live in a three-dimensional world, but it isn't always easy to explain simple things in 3 dimensions. They become more complex in 3 dimensions. So we generally revert to the idea of explaining it in 1 or 2 dimensions because it's simpler. Standing waves is the perfect example. Guitar string oscillations is 1-dimensional, and we can extend that to 2-dimensional, where you have like a drum skin vibrating, and then we can extend that to 3 dimensions, which is standing waves in the real world. That's a classic example. Well, space-time, how do I describe the concept of empty space being a fabric within which everything exists? One way of doing it is to not go for 3D, but go for 2D. I've basically got 3 minutes now before the Atheist Experience starts to try and explain what space-time is. or at least give an idea. Okay, imagine that you had a trampoline skin, a bouncy trampoline skin, and imagine that you stood on one side of the trampoline skin and I stood on the other side of the trampoline skin, and imagine that I had a tiny little golf ball, and I stood on one side and I rolled the golf ball across the trampoline skin to you. What would happen is the golf ball would basically go across the trampoline skin. If you were really, really careful, you might see that the trampoline skin deviates, dips slightly because of the weight of the golf ball, but maybe not, because trampoline skins are quite tight. Okay, then I take a shot put, a big lump of metal, and I shove it in the middle of the trampoline skin. Now imagine I take the golf ball and we move well away from the shot put, and I roll the golf ball across the trampoline skin, well away from the shot put. It goes across the trampoline skin as normal. Now if I move a little bit closer, in fact, let's go so I have basically the shot put right between us, and I roll the golf ball. It will basically go towards you and then drop into the dip created by the shot put and stop. Okay, now let's move a little bit away. If I move a little bit away, but not that far, and I roll the golf ball will move initially in a straight line, but then as it gets to the deviation that is created by the shot put, as it gets to the trampoline skin being bent, it will bend its path around. It won't follow a straight line, it will follow a curved path. Well, that's what space-time is. If you're in a situation where, and friction messes this up, of course, if we assume that there's no friction with the trampoline skin and I get the speed right, I could actually get the golf ball going around in a circle around the shot put. Again, that would need no friction. We would call that orbit. That's like an object in orbit. So actually, we don't really need the force of gravity to explain orbits. Okay, well, we're getting close to the atheist experience starting now. I'm getting my mouse ready to turn off the sound as soon as it starts. But space-time is like the trampoline skin. The trampoline skin is a fabric within which the shot put and the golf ball exist. And basically, the fabric of everything, of the cosmos, is called space-time. It is the substance within which everything has to exist. And the interesting thing is it can be stretched. We know that space-time can be stretched and bent. A black hole, for example, stretches space-time so much that you can't get out of it. So that's the idea of space-time. It's an interesting idea. It came from Einstein, who was crazy. And the final thing I'm going to mention to you is that there is a BBC movie film. I'm just going to mute there because the Atheist Experience is about to start. And there's a BBC movie, and it's called, I think it's called Einstein and Eddington. It might be the other way around. It might be Eddington and Einstein, but I think it's Einstein and Eddington. And it's about Albert Einstein coming up with these ideas and Eddington in the UK at Cambridge basically testing them. And the principle that is being considered here is this concept of space-time. If light comes off an object and goes into your eyes, does it travel in a straight line? We think it does. But actually space-time means it bends. And Eddington was able to show that. And if you're interested, look it up on the BBC. I'll put a link in the things. I'm going to move on to the Atheist Experience now so we can get into it. Take it. Hopefully this will be all fine.
Yes, sir.
Good. Thank you for having me, Matt. I'm excited to be
thrilled.
Here. It's good to see you too.
Yeah, and it feels like, I know we're still doing things remotely, and it was great to get you in here, but it also, I've started to go out into the world a little bit more. I've been locked in my house since last March, but I went out and mostly I still wear a mask everywhere, even though they're not requiring it because I don't trust other people. But I got a couple of hugs. I went on a date. I wore a mask. I went to Esther's Follies. It was healing. So it's so good to have you here this week. What's going on with you right now?
No, I was gonna say I've been going on bike rides, taking walks around where I live. It's been wonderful. And otherwise, no, it's been good. If anyone's watching on YouTube, please subscribe to Friendly Atheist while you're here. Just another tab. Go open it. Go do it. Thanks.
Yes. Please check out Friendly Atheist, the blog and everything else. And I've said this before, you know, this is no secret. In the years that I was working on nonprofits, it was basically, let's go read everything that Hemant did this week, and we'll do news stories about it, and we'll have discussions and stuff like that. So you have been the touchstone for us for ages. I tell you what, let's not waste any time at all.
Yeah,
let's go straight to calls. Marlon in the Philippines, you're on the air with Hemant and Matt. How are you?
How are you guys? I've been watching your YouTube videos, Matt. It's been
welcome.
really calming.
It says here you had some sort of experience this morning that you think might be a miracle or something. You wanted to ask us about it.
Yes, basically, I'm a Catholic, but my friend invited me to a Baptist church, and I have seen this pastor who declares himself the chosen one, because I saw him literally ignite his hand on fire without even flinching. And then he also did this food miracle at lunchtime with everyone having their hands up.
Missed that. Didn't know what he said there.
What do you think? Is this some kind of divine?
You know, this is quite interesting. That I don't know whether this is genuine or not, but we'll go with the fact that it is. If you see a magician on the TV, or an illusionist, whatever you want to call them, like David Blaine, Darren Brown, that kind of thing, and you see them do something that appears to be a miracle, in the sense that, you know, that's not possible, that's got to be magic, because how can that happen? And there's plenty of people that can do this. What you do when you see these things is you don't automatically assume it's magic. You don't automatically assume that you've just watched the rules of the universe break. You assume that it's a trick. It's a blooming good trick. I don't know how it has happened. I don't know how to do it, but I really wish I did, because that would be quite interesting to do it with other people. But you don't assume that it's like a warping of the rules of the universe and it was genuinely magic. So why is it that we know that people will abuse people? We know that lots of churches, there's plenty of evidence. We don't have to go very far from the Catholic Church to look at how basically corrupt religions can be. And I'm not saying that non-religions aren't corrupt. You know, there's corruption everywhere. But my point is, when somebody's trying to convince you of something and they're going to take money off you, then surely you are skeptical. Just like, you know, David Blaine is not the next coming. David Blaine is not able to do magic. David Blaine is not able to warp the rules of the universe to suit his particular interest at that moment in time. He is a magician, but that's really an illusionist of some kind, if that's what we want to call it. And this person seems to not have that level of skepticism, which I think is actually quite interesting and weird, because all of these people, these magicians, they're on the TV. All around the world, people can watch them.
What do you think? Is this some kind of divine intervention?
So we already know the answer to this.
I'm wondering, so you've got a Baptist pastor and you say he declares himself the chosen one. What does that mean?
It means that he has a sign from God that this pastor received a portion of power from heaven.
Okay, and can I just point out that what Matt is doing here is kind of what we should all be doing when we meet anything in life. If you're not sure that you understand it, or it seems a bit strange, or you want to try and understand it a little bit better, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you understand the language that is being used. In business, we talk about the buzzwords or the buzz terms. People use the buzz terms. In business, I've been there, you basically talk using the same complicated words, complicated language, and actually everybody uses them and very few people really understand what they mean. you basically fake it. Okay, well, what Matt is doing here is, first of all, just establishing, so what's the definitions here? Like when someone says they're the chosen one, what does that actually mean? We need to get used to that as an individual, that you need to be questioning the language that's being used all the time. Make sure you understand what people mean by it.
That this pastor received a portion of power from heaven.
What the heck does power mean?
Yeah,
Work done per unit time.
Fire.
Okay, so I want to get to the hands on fire thing. I want to get the hands on fire thing, but what I'm going to say is, I'm not aware of any sort of biblical notion, and certainly nothing consistent with my Baptist upbringing, which you're talking about a Baptist church, where a pastor would declare themselves a chosen one or to have power from God. In every instance I've ever heard of this, it's always been, as far as I can tell, an attempt to con areas where they think power like this has happened. So describe for us, when you say he lit his hand on fire, describe for us as best you can and as quickly as you can what you saw.
I saw him praying with his eyes closed and with his hands on his chest. And then when he snaps his fingers, literal fire blows out of his hands. It's like the Pentecost, but on the palms of his hands.
Oh, that's quite easy, surely.
True story. I was in a play when I was in middle school.
Hang on, go ahead, Hemmett.
I was in a play when I was in middle school where I played like a bad guy, and one of the special effects we had was literally a magic trick that it was like a lighter in my hand, and if I went like this, it looked like I was setting something on fire in my hand. I'm not saying that's what he did, but it's always interesting that when I hear about pastors who do these types of magic tricks, and I've heard, by the way, pastors are floating in the air like an inch, or they're showing you something on their phone, like some picture that is something from heaven or something like that. It is amazing to me that these self-described prophets or the chosen one or whatever they want to call themselves, this is the thing God has given them the power to do. Mind you, we are coming through a pandemic right now. There's so much they could do if they had real power, and yet the power you're describing is a magic trick where he shows you his hand is on fire or something. I don't know why that's supposed to be convincing to all these people when there's so many things, if he actually had God-ordained powers, he could be doing that really would be a miracle and not a magic trick, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a magician. I've lit my hand on fire. If you just go to Google and type in hand on fire, you will get a bunch of pictures of people with their hands on fire. You will get YouTube videos telling you how to safely set your hands on fire. You will get science videos showing, and a number of different ways to do it. There are ways where you'll have a fire resting in your palm that comes up. You'll have some where it looks like your hand is actually on fire due to a chemical. There's lots of different ways to do it. I'm
really curious how soon it took after that fire trick before the collection plate was passed around.
Okay, here's the part where Marlon is going to tell us why we're wrong about what we're saying. Go ahead.
Matt, when you were doing the school play, did your hands burn?
When I did it, no. It was a trick. It was fake fire. It was just an illusion.
Well, I've done it with real fire, and no, my hand doesn't burn. And there's lots of ways to do it with chemicals, special effects, and other things to make it look like it. But yes, I've had real fire, and my hand doesn't burn.
This is from the Philippines, and it's like he declares himself some kind of modern-day prophet.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is the trick that he did, if he's doing it through divine power, as my friend James Randi used to say, he's doing it the hard way because there are easier ways to do that trick. But as Hemmett was pointing out, and this is a great point, why would God give someone the power to set their hand on fire instead of giving them the power to heal people, to feed people? Why just a quick trick that you can buy from a magic store instead of something useful?
This pastor multiplied food on the spot.
Okay,
Or
Marlon, I'm trying to address your question, and when I raised this problem of he did a shitty miracle that you can buy in most magic shops, now without acknowledging it, without saying anything else, you immediately go on to he multiplied food on the table. I've done that before too. Matter of fact, I'm putting together a magic show that is basically me copying the tricks of Jesus. I'm going to multiply food. I'm going to turn water to wine. If you want me to, I'll add turning my hand into fire on there, because all of these are things that you can do with magic tricks. Why is it that the pastor that you're talking about, who's been supposedly given power from God, can't do anything that a good magician could do or couldn't do?
I don't know.
Well, think about it, Marlon, because the answer's really easy.
Yeah,
I
get it,
invited
but
into this church.
Yeah, I tell you, I cannot. So I wasn't. Hang on, Marlon. I wasn't there, and I didn't see it. So all I can do is give my opinion of what you described. But what you described, I don't find to be remotely miraculous. I don't find it to be remotely good evidence for anything. And in fact, I find it kind of cheesy that over and over again, I see videos all over the place of preachers and men of God all over the world doing easy, cheap magic tricks. And in some cases, they'll do some that are more complicated. But I don't understand how setting someone's hand on fire could be anything. But that's all I've got on that, Marlon.
It's also telling that he's not relying on the sermon. He's not relying on the Bible to convince people to take him seriously. He's relying on an illusion.
So does that mean the miracles are fake?
Yes.
They are fake.
Yes. I cannot prove that the miracles are fake, but that's the problem. If there's no way to show that they're fake, but they haven't demonstrated that they're real, which one you think's more likely? And even if you can't decide which one's more likely, you shouldn't believe either. You should just say, I don't know what happened.
I don't know what happened is the honest answer.
Yep.
To be exact.
And I don't know either, Marlon. We're gonna move on to some other calls. I appreciate the call. I appreciate the interesting stuff. Go watch some more. See what you can find. Maybe you can get take a cell phone and actually record it the next time he sets it on fire, and maybe we can figure out exactly which trick he purchased.
I guess I'm an atheist now.
Okay, that's just a little bit of a weird thing, Marlon. It makes it feel like you're switching with the wind. I think the point that is worth noting here is, if someone genuinely had divine power, why aren't they going into all of the hospitals in their local region and curing people of COVID, rather than sitting back on your arse doing parlor tricks to take people's money and allowing people to die in hospitals? Absolutely outrageous. Why don't people question this absolute rubbish? It's interesting that all of the faith healers seem to have disappeared. They all seem to have shrunk into nothing. None of them are going into hospitals and curing people with COVID. And if they did, do you not think that would make big news? Suddenly, all the people in this hospital, no one has COVID. Never mind, no one has cancer. No one has heart disease. Somebody turned up at that hospital and cured everybody. And the reason it doesn't happen is because it can't happen.
Well, so I don't know that that's enough for anybody to truly be an atheist, but certainly be more skeptical. And, if you see something that's amazing, ask yourself, what did I see? What can I say about it? What can I tell about it? Do I know how it was done? Because if the answer is I don't know, then you certainly can't be in a position where you could say that was a miracle. All you can say is, I don't know what that was. I need more information. Announcements to make as well. I'm shuffling things around.
I'm going to shoot for just a little bit.
Thanks for that. Patreon. Get to some more callers here today. I've got Pete in Texas, somewhere in Texas. Pete, you're on with Matt and Hemet. How are you, sir?
Hey, good. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Okay, he speaks fast.
Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm calling from El Paso, Texas, and and I've been watching clips of your Atheist Experience show on YouTube for quite some time, and I was wondering, as far as you know, has anything you've done with the show made a positive, measurable difference in the world? Key word of my question being measurable. And feel free, Hemant, you can chime in too, even though it's not your show. But
yeah, well, I mean, Hemat's been working similarly. So the measurable thing is the hard part, and so I would say yes, but what I'm considering measurable is like how many people's minds have been changed. That's a measurable thing. We don't know exactly because I haven't bothered to count it, but it's thousands and thousands of people who are embracing skepticism, who are abandoning superstition and religion. For example, you take the last caller. Whether he identifies as an atheist or whatever is not really my concern. But the fact that he could have been potentially duped by a con artist, maybe it's real, but at a minimum, he could have been duped. And now he's going to be more skeptical about that. But there are people who email us on a regular basis to say, hey, thank you for what you've done on the show because it's taught me about skepticism and it's helped heal wounds in my family, or it's created a rift here. So what becomes measurable apart from like the number of people whose minds are changing? I'm not sure.
I would, if I can jump in there.
Yeah, please.
Like Matt said, I don't know what measure you want to use. I don't keep a tally count anywhere of people who have emailed me to say they've become an atheist because of what I wrote or what they heard or anything. I genuinely don't care. But I do have, I have a whole bunch of emails from people who have written over the years who have said, you helped me think about these things that I just accepted for a really long time, which is meaningful to me. In addition to that, if you're looking for a different type of measurement, I can tell you people who have either chosen to go into politics or make donations to nonprofits or, I mean, we've raised money for causes that we thought were important that people have given to. So, I mean, it depends on how you want to measure it.
I have a feeling that Pete is disingenuous with his comment, but I might be wrong, and he might be about to prove me wrong, but my gut is telling me, I'm just getting my spider sense tingling here, that I don't think Pete is genuine in his comment. I think it's meant as a kind of a kick, but we'll see in a second, because this is live, of course, so I genuinely don't know what he's going to say. Measurable, if you can convince people to just be more skeptical, that's a positive thing, surely, because skepticism doesn't mean atheism, but it does mean that you approach situations in life less likely to be conned. Is that not a good thing? I mean, I think that is a good thing, and I think that they're doing that every week, to be truthful. So I would argue that the Atheist Experience and all of its kind of sister shows, they are doing incredible work. But we'll see what Pete says.
Important that people have given to. So, I mean, it depends on how you want to measure it. I mean, I think a lot of churches will say, well, you can measure our success by the number of baptisms or, you know, how many people we sent on mission trips. And I don't find either of those metrics particularly useful in saying how much of an actual positive impact they had. So again, depends how you want to say measurable, but I mean, I can point you to emails I've received. I can show you fundraisers we've done. But again, I'm not sitting here with a scorecard of how many atheists we've deconverted.
And I'll add on that, you know, that's a measure as well. Over the years, we have raised and contributed a bunch of money to a bunch of organizations recovering from religion, Foundation Beyond Belief, others, and charitable organizations like Atheists Helping the Homeless, Humanists at Work, things like that. So there are actual numerical financial aspects to what we've done, but it's really hard to quantify. Hey, we sat around and we had a bunch of discussions about God, and exactly how did that positively, quantifiably, measurably affect somebody? I don't know that that's something that's easy to do.
If I can also add on that, I mean, quantifiably, because some groups have been keeping track of how many open atheists have run for office, because I think that's a type of metric that would be interesting in terms of being out and public about your atheism, not political party, but being out about it. And that's gone up quite a bit over the past several years. I could give you specific numbers, but the point is, if I find that to be a useful term, I think there's a lot of other things that matter. What are they doing with their power if they get into elected office? I mean, there are people who might look at that and say, well, I don't like their politics, so I don't find that a positive.
Yeah, this is where we're going to get to the point where Pete disagrees with us about positive, but hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, depends what you mean by positive, depends what you mean by measurable.
Yeah. Does that help, Pete?
Yeah, no, yeah, it does. But in terms of the measurable part, you did a pretty good job of explaining it, both of you. But yes, I actually was going to go off on a tangent if you got a minute or two about the positive. Of course, if I'm a theist and you guys are atheists, of course we're going to see things differently. And you might say that, okay, well, there's been these people who've been calling in and they're Christians, and we finally got them to become free thinkers, and they accepted atheism. It's just made more sense to them. And was it positive though? Whatever they went, did they have a really terrible life when they were Christians? Were they doing a lot of destructive things? But now that they become atheists,
whoa, okay. Pete now is going down a road that really is not a wise road to go down. There are numerous examples of people who are in the depth of religion, and if they start to question their religion, they basically get ostracized. In the UK, we'd have the phrase sent to Coventry. People will basically mentally abuse them. There are numerous examples of relatively young people. I don't actually know what I mean by that. People who basically their parents are still alive. That's kind of like a huge number. I'd like to think that's those people are defined now, but in my terms as young. So they could be 30, 40, 50. And they've decided that they actually don't believe, and their parents have disowned them. The religious impact of the parents, the pressure on the parents, has been such that the parents feel they would disown their child. Now, I have 2 children. They're not, children. I mean, they're pretty old now, they're sort of early 30s. And they are my world, with my wife and the dogs. They are my world. There is nothing more important to me than my family. The idea that you could kind of say something, they could say something to me and I would literally disown them like they do not exist, is never going to happen. Yet in religion it does. And there's plenty of examples of it. So I think Pete is walking down a really dodgy alleyway here. He needs to think a little bit more, not just review what he's about to say based on his own experience of religion, which may be absolutely fine, but actually just stop and think for a second about the impact that the grossness of religion has had on an awful lot of people.
To them, and was it positive though? Whatever they went, did they have a really terrible life when they were Christians? Were they doing a lot of destructive things? But now that they become atheists, they become better humanitarians, or I mean. Again, that's going to be hard for you guys to answer about
No, it's not. No, it's not.
But if I told you they did, would you say, all right, well, I guess atheists have a point then? If I told you they started volunteering more, would that change anything you're saying here?
I think that would make me feel a little bit better. But talking to a lot of my Christian friends, I discussed this question with them before I even came on the show, and it was like, okay, no one's keeping a tally of this. You guys already said no one's keeping a tally. So, I mean, let's say that some Christian people became atheists and they're just more laid back. They become partiers. They turn to drugs. And
what on earth is Pete talking about?
If you could just humor me.
A stretch, Pete. A stretch. Go ahead. Build your straw man so I can burn it the fuck down in just a minute. Go ahead.
I want to know about all these things I do.
I'm sorry, what things you do for what?
Surely, Pete, you realise you're being a bit of a dick now.
No, I'm the most boring, laid-back person ever. I'm just curious what else you think
I've used drugs, Pete, but please keep building that straw man. I'm ready to light my hand on fire and burn it down. Go ahead.
Yeah, I use drugs too, guys.
Okay, then why are you saying, what if people turn to atheism and all of a sudden they're doing drugs and other stuff? Okay, so what? The thing is that where we disagree about what's positive or not What I want is, can you demonstrate something that is demonstrably positive and true that can only be achieved by being a Christian?
Can I answer your first question?
What was my first question? Go ahead.
I don't know either.
As you guys were talking, you just said, so what if it's, you know, drug, you know, these people have turned to drugs, and you said, well, what difference would that make? And I said, well, you know, the difference could be that for the most part, when you talk about drugs, it's usually related with something that's negative. It's not like, hey, this guy got hooked on heroin, and man, he's become so much more productive in life. He's helping his family grow, and
Pete,
things are really going
on.
No. Actually, most of the time when you're talking about drugs, you're talking about weed. That's the most common illegal drug. You got a problem with people smoking weed? I don't.
I've smoked it. I'm not happy about it,
but who cares?
It's okay.
You know, it's a tiny percentage of people who are on addictive chemicals who are doing it in a destructive fashion, and that's not limited to non-theists.
But going back to the question, though, you were saying if they become atheists and they start down this path of destruction.
Excuse me, I'm getting bombarded from two different things, and so Matt said something, and I'd like to address it. And now,
go ahead. Go ahead. Address Matt's thing.
Now I'm already even forgetting. Like, Matt, you said so. Oh yeah, you said it's a small percentage, and that's not true. I know that it's not true, and I'll tell you one reason I do know it. Yesterday here in El Paso, you know El Paso's right on the border of Juarez, Mexico. I recently moved to Texas, and I got a tour. My ex-roommate's husband is a Border Patrol agent who's getting ready to retire, and he gave us a 3-hour tour, kind of like Gilligan's Island, and he educated us so much about all this drug stuff. And no, it's not marijuana. In fact, that even came up. It's ironic that you would mention that, because he said no, it is so
no.
All the
what are we talking about anymore?
Pete, I apologize. Evidently, you misunderstood. You didn't say at the beginning, what if people start turning to drugs, and clearly say, I'm talking about addictive, problematic drugs. You just said turn to drugs. I'm saying people turn to drugs frequently, and some of them are the problem. You don't get to just only limit it to the problem, and you don't get to pretend that the problem is only limited to non-theists. Yes, there are drugs that are a problem. Yes, there are people who are addicted. It's like 38% of all adults have dealt with some sort of abuse issue. And what's the most common drug that's problematic? Alcohol. Alcohol is the most common drug that is problematic. It is legal. It is what people use on a regular basis. Instead of talking about weed or heroin, we should have gone to alcohol, because it's legal. It's used in church services. It is addictive, and it causes problems, and it results in countless deaths. And it has nothing to do with whether someone is a theist or an atheist. So can we get back on track?
Sure, we can get back on track.
So what is the true and demonstrably positive thing that can only occur from becoming a Christian?
I'm trying to wrap my mind around that. So what is the only true and positive demonstrable?
Can you name a true and demonstrably positive benefit that can only occur by being a Christian? Is there something that you can do that is true and good that I can't do as an atheist?
If you're talking about someone who is a true follower of Christ, and when I say true, I mean someone who's really born again, which I know you know what that means, Matt, but not everyone else does. But if it's someone like that, once they have truly surrendered their lives to Jesus Christ, they become a new person with a new heart and new desires, and they can live a life that is very productive and more beneficial to the world, because they're not affected by sin as much as like a guy like you, me, or Hamed.
I haven't heard an answer to your question, Matt.
Yeah, I haven't heard an answer to my question either. Name something that is true and positive that a Christian can do that I can't do.
dedicate their life to Christ.
That is not, you can't demonstrate that that is true and positive, because I think that's a negative.
Yeah.
And I think it's a fiction. Okay, then demonstrate that it is true and positive for one to dedicate one's life to Christ. This will be great.
Yeah, it will be great. Let me tell you about a guy I met.
No, Pete. I don't want a story. I want you to make the argument that dedicating one's life to Jesus is something that is true, that there is a Jesus and something to dedicate to, and that it is positive.
It requires a story, and don't say it doesn't. Listen.
But your entire question was implying that if someone's an atheist, they are not doing something that is good and true and positive or anything like that. And our entire argument to you is it depends how you want to define those words. You mentioned drug use. It depends what type of drugs we're talking about. I could point you to people who started volunteering or who decided to give themselves to others because they felt this is the only life that they can live. So that they got to make the most of it right now. I just posted the other day about an atheist who found out that he's living with ALS. He's not going to be around for much longer. And he was grappling with the question of, what do? I don't believe there's an afterlife. What can I do with my time that I have left? Because there's nothing else out there for me. I don't believe in an afterlife. And he was talking about all the ways he was trying to make sure he was helping other people, the way he was trying to give back to his community as best he could. That to me seems like a demonstrable thing for an atheist to do, because they're not waiting for an afterlife. It's not that religious people couldn't also give themselves to their communities or what have you, but this is what he was doing as an atheist, and he felt compelled to do it because he knew there was an expiration date in the future to his life, and after that it was done. But if your argument is that stuff doesn't exist, it does exist. I mean, there's countless examples of it, but it genuinely sounds like no answer we give here is going to satisfy your claim that there's nothing positive that an atheist can contribute here.
Now, I'm going to get back to your question, but before that, just out of curiosity, you talking about David Warnock?
Yes.
Yeah, David called me on the phone about 2 or 3 weeks ago. You can confirm it with him. We had a long talk. He's a nice guy. I donated some money to his cause. Anyway, I am going to tell you a story, and if you want to hang up on me, you can. But it's only.
I am, and I'm going to explain why. It's important that you understand this. A story is just an anecdote. There's no way to verify any of it. There's no way you can demonstrate the truth of something by telling me a story about another person. That does not demonstrate the truth of anything. Do you at least understand that?
I do understand that, but we're not inside.
Good. That's why we're not doing the story, Pete.
No, we should.
Yeah,
are you afraid of the story? I mean, come on.
No, Pete, I'm not afraid of anything except wasting time. And for you just admitted that there's no way your story can demonstrate the truth of the claim. If your story cannot do that, then it would be a waste of time for me to let you tell the story. You got to find a different way to demonstrate truth. It's not my fault, Pete, that you believe something is true that you cannot demonstrate.
Move on.
A 90-second story is going to kill you guys.
Move on.
No, but you not understanding and smugly trying to preach on my show is not going to kill any of us either. And me hanging up on you isn't going to kill anybody either. Learn how to make the case for something being true, because you just admitted that what you're about to do cannot demonstrate the truth of the proposition, and therefore we will not be wasting any time on it.
Excellent.
On that note,
Why do I feel
there's
that
more
Pete will
announcements,
be
by the
here
way.
next
I
week,
forgot that in addition
unfortunately.
to the also on Truth Wanted, that show today.
Can I just also say that if you're in America and you're watching this, then please be aware that if you have an Amazon account, you can do, I think it's called Amazon Smile, and basically everything that you purchase through Amazon, a proportion of it or some small amount can be goes to a charity, and you can make that charity the Atheist Experience or the ACA, not the Atheist Community, the ACA. And we can't do that in the UK because Amazon don't allow us to give money to a charity in another country. There's probably some legal reason why.
Today, and in between talk, and those are the people that you're going to see behind the scenes. But if you're over on YouTube, here's an interesting one. David in California says God can't be proven through science, but can through history and experience.
Oh, yeah,
so
okay.
Welcome, David. How are you?
Right, I'm going to take a guess at where this one's going. Basically, the idea is that scientifically we can't show that God exists, and at least whoever this is going to be accepting of that point. But what they'll do is they'll basically say, but if we can use other evidence, like looking at books and stuff, then we can do. The problem here, I'm kind of guessing, will be what the word evidence means, what the word fact and what the word evidence means. I suspect that will be the crux of this discussion.
Through science, but can through history and experience. So welcome, David. How are you?
I'm doing great, Matt. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm glad Hemmett's here because, did you hear the last call with Pete?
Yeah, I think that was a repeat.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because you're going to claim that God can't be proved through science. I have no idea if that's true or not. I just don't think it has. But you're going to claim that God can be proved through history and experience. And I want to caution you that if it just turns into stories that can't be verified, that's not going to prove anything. That's the part Pete got right. Right?
Well, I'm looking at results more than anything.
Results? What do you like? What do you mean results?
Well, I think that Christianity is far more fair and establishes equality, whereas science can't do those things. It's actually the opposite. But Christianity is superior in the results that it produces in human beings in their lives.
That's not true, but what does that have to do with it being true?
In case you're not understanding. It's possible that being a Christian could make someone feel really good, even if Christianity wasn't true, right?
Yeah, there's lots of things that make people feel good. There's lots of people that do things bad and feel good. Okay,
no, hang on. Don't get ahead, David. This is easy. So, it's also possible that if someone believed Christianity was true, it could make them a better person, even if Christianity wasn't true, right?
No, I just had a little discussion with Jimmy about this over at the Talk Heathen.
No, Dave. So, hang on. I heard you on Talk Heathen. The question I asked was, is it possible that Christianity, let's imagine Christianity's not true, but someone believes it's true, it's possible that could make someone a better person, believing that it's true, even if it's not. And you say that's not the case?
Well, I was just going to say that Jimmy claimed that he was a better person now that he's an atheist. Okay, so I don't agree. So,
Jimmy, hang on, David, stop. What Jimmy was saying is that he had a drug problem and he's better. And you said that you don't think he's better. And he said, fuck you. Now, before I say fuck you and get rid of you, will you answer my question? Is it possible that someone could believe any religion, including Christianity, and believe in the tenets of that religion and have that belief make them a better person, even if the religion itself is not true? Is that possible?
It's possible that you could be a more amicable person. Is that what you're saying?
If you believed that the religion is true, is it possible that belief alone can make you act in a better way, even if the religion is not true?
No, that's kind of vague to me. I don't.
Okay, clear. David, I'm going to make this really simple. Is it possible that if someone believed a God was watching them, that it might make them behave better, even if a God wasn't watching them?
Hasn't worked for me, no.
Okay, we're done. We're done because you're not going to answer questions honestly, because the answer to that question is an obvious yes. Of course, you can impact people to be better through lies. That's what parents do to children. And the fact that you can't recognize that means that this call is now over. Thanks.
That was a fun history lesson.
Yeah. See, We convince children to behave better by believing in Santa.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, I have little ones, and yeah, it's a constant going through all those things about what I was fed in terms of religion, and now what I talk to my kids about in terms of Santa, in terms of things like that. It's like, I need you to behave. We'll get around to the right reason for doing it, but they're not necessarily old enough to understand the right reason, the moral reason for doing things.
Yep.
But we need to get there first, and then we can talk about those things. So, but the point being, like, if the question is Christianity, the first thing that guy said was Christianity makes things more fair or equal. It's like, have you looked out the window? Have you seen what Christianity does to people these days? I mean, equality and fairness is not anywhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, David had called in to talk heathen, and was not particularly the most honest interlocutor. And there were a number of questions that I would like to ask, but unfortunately, if we can't even recognize that it's possible to convince someone to be a better person, even if the thing that you use to convince them isn't ultimately true, I mean, then you just missed the lesson from Santa Claus. You just missed the lesson from the fact that all those other religions you don't believe in have inspired people to do things, including good things. The problem is that religions also inspire people to do bad things.
And it's a lot easier to get them to do bad things when you can convince them it's all good.
Yeah. And meanwhile, atheism, which isn't something you convert to, unlike a couple of callers ago, doesn't have any tenets and doesn't have any way. There's nothing within atheism that could ever get someone to kill another human being or enslave another human being on behalf of atheism. That's not possible. However, that is possible for a number of different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we got, yes, I'm good with an amen all the time. Danny in Florida wants to talk to us and ask some advice. So welcome, Danny.
Hey, Matt. Hey, man. How you doing today?
Hey. Excellent.
Doing well, thanks.
All right. Great. Okay. I'm calling pretty much to speak with Matt. And Matt, I know you're not a psychiatrist, but I really admire your intelligence and your experience. So I'm gonna ask you, and hopefully you can help me out a little bit. What kind of transpired is I've converted or talked my girlfriend into being an atheist, and she was pretty much Christian prior to that. And what's happened is it kind of caused more harm than good.
No, it didn't. No, it didn't. No, it absolutely did not. I know what you're getting ready to. I know what you're getting ready to say. She's now depressed that she's not going to get to go to heaven and see her family and stuff like that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I will have thoughts here, and I'm sure Hemet has thoughts here as well. My thoughts are really simple. It is not her conversion to atheism that caused this depression. It is the lie from Christianity that caused this depression. Mm-hmm. Christianity built up a false expectation that everything's going to be fine and rosy someday, and after we're dead, we're all going to get to spend eternity together, just blissfully running through the Elysian fields and enjoying and singing praises and everything else. It's as if someone told your girlfriend that she was going to inherit $1 billion, and today she found out that that's not the case. It is not the fault of the truth that she feels bad. It is the fault of the lie that she feels bad. And getting to recognize that, she can also come to the recognition that this is a gift, because not only does she have the truth now as opposed to the lie, or at least at a minimum, she is not believing something without good reason, but she now gets to recognize that she has exactly one life. If there is an afterlife, it's a bonus that we don't know anything about and nobody can demonstrate. She has one life, and that means that you're more likely to treat people better the first time. It means that you're going to make amends with your family members rather than bearing a grudge forever. It is difficult, and it will be painful and annoying and depressing for her while she's transitioning through this. But the best thing for her to do is to interact with other non-believers who have gone through the same thing and who are going through the same thing now, and potentially reaching out to something like Recovering from Religion, where there are counselors there who can help and answer these questions, and something like the Psychotherapist Project. But it is not the fault of her becoming an atheist that she is depressed. It is not the fault of becoming an atheist any more than, hey, if you felt like I'm going to be rich, and then you find out you're not, that example that I used before of the billionaire, or maybe you really thought that somebody loved you, or that, this was going to be your soulmate, and you found out this is not my soulmate, and you find out there's no such thing as a soulmate. Now, all of a sudden, you have a better understanding of reality, so that the next relationship you enter into, you do it on the proper grounds. You do it going into it knowing what to expect. Christianity and religions have done a terrible job of teaching human beings how to deal with death. Death is an inevitable, unavoidable part of life. And if we learned and were taught how to deal with it better to begin with, we wouldn't have the fear and misery that we have about losing our loved ones, and we wouldn't have this, oh, I can't wait to see you in Fantasyland. But I want Hammett to get into, because I've said this probably 20 times.
No, I love that answer. The only thing I would add to that is it sounds like what she's upset about is change more than the atheism. And part of that is, look, when you change anything, she left religion, she's now an atheist. That is a tough transition for a lot of people, especially if you're coming from a very conservative, very fundamentalist type of Christianity. But change is always hard. The answer isn't that there's a problem with atheism. The answer is it's new. There's a lot of aspects, and letting go of all that stuff she was believing for so long, it takes a while to come to terms with that. And again, anyone who's listened to this show knows that when you're an atheist, like Matt said, there can be compelling reasons to make this life a better one. But all of this is not going to fall into place for your girlfriend immediately. Sometimes it might be reading more books. It might be listening to more people, like Matt said, talking to other atheists, talking to the secular therapist, what have you. It takes a little bit of time to figure out how to deal with your entire world coming out from under you because you just realized they were feeding you lies. And so the depression isn't the issue. She should have someone to talk to. And my advice, and again, I'm saying this not as a therapist, is that it really will help to talk to other people who have been there, who have gone through it, who could tell you what the end of the tunnel looks like there, because that will help her come to terms with reality. But otherwise, no, what Matt said there about the problem here isn't atheism. The problem is all the lies she was fed beforehand and realizing none of that stuff was real.
Does that help, Danny?
Yeah, that helps a lot. I was, I of course think along all those lines. And, myself, I can't understand how a person way more intelligent than I could believe in such a thing. It's just beyond.
Because it's not about intelligence. So.
Yeah, but
if you're part of a really strong church culture, there are reasons that draw you in there that make you want to believe that stuff for reasons that, have nothing to do with how smart someone is. There are other reasons you are drawn into that. And when you realize it is based on these premises of lies, it takes a lot of work mentally to step away from that and realize, how do you make sense of the world if the things you've been taught in Sunday school or at home were not real? How do you make sense of that? How do you deal with all these people who you are probably very close to who believe something that you now find dishonest? I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot for anyone to deal with. And that is really hard, especially at first. And that's not even getting into relationships you have with people who belong in that group still, and trying to step away from all that, because for so many people, even when they have those doubts, they can't leave church because they're so tied up in that culture. So I'm not surprised it's upsetting, but it's not the fact that she is now an atheist that is the problem here.
It's when I say it's not about intelligence, there's a quote. It may be a quote from Shermer, but I might be getting this wrong. That's smart people are often very good at rationalizing things they came to believe for not smart reasons. And so you can be incredibly intelligent and you can be incredibly knowledgeable. And if you become convinced of something for bad reasons, and it becomes something that's cherished, it's a part of you, you can then spend forever defending it with even worse reasons, as long as you're capable of doing that kind of rationalization. So this is not a thing about IQ or smarts in any colloquial sense.
Okay. You be there for her, you help her out as she's going through that process, and hopefully you can guide her to some resources that'll help her out too.
You know, I have been, and I went to the to telling her, you know, like Nat said earlier, because I've heard him say this before about this is the only life you have to live, and if you need to make the best of it while you're here, and do the right things, so on and so forth. And I think that's helped her a little bit. I just have to bear with her, I guess, and be there for her and help her get through the process. And I really thank you guys for picking up my call, and I really appreciate your advice, and I hope you guys have a great day.
Absolutely.
You too, and that's just good relationship advice, period.
Thanks, Danny. Make sure you just give it time and be supportive, because for almost everybody, it will in fact get better over time.
Okay. Thank you very much, you guys. Have a great day, okay?
Cheers. You too, Danny.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you and I have heard that story a bazillion D1 times. I'll just make up a number.
Yeah. And we've heard it from pastors. I mean, if you're talking about going from one extreme to the other, I mean, if you're talking about going through that depression and how tough it is, maybe the people, at least from my experience, who have had to deal with the difficulty of that more than anybody are people who literally dedicated their lives to promoting those lies because they genuinely believe them. Pastors, priests who decided, I don't believe this stuff anymore. And when they leave, I mean, Julia Sweeney does this in Letting Go of God, where she talks about when she started having those doubts, it wasn't just about God. It's trying to recalibrate everything you knew, including like, well, then how are the planets up in the air?
Right.
Like, and how do you deal with that? Because there's so many things that you just attributed to God. And if you take God out of the picture, it's like, I mean, I don't know if this is the right analogy, but it's like when you become a vegetarian or something and you do that for ethical reasons, or you go vegan for ethical reasons, you start having to question every food decision, clothing decision that you're making, even things you weren't thinking about because you didn't realize it was affected. And I mean, it's one thing if you believe it very strongly and you're willing to go through that transition, the bumpy transition process. But when you're not really expecting it, which I think for a lot of people, atheism is that, where I didn't want to be it, but I think this is where the evidence goes. It's not something you volunteered and signed up to do. You're just like, wait, if this is real, then like all this other stuff has to start making sense. And you realize, you know, it's realizing my parents lied to me and it wasn't intentional, but that is what you grew up with. And this priest or pastor that you loved was lying to you, and it wasn't intentional. They're not bad people, but they were wrong about this stuff. And you got to redo all of that stuff. What a difficult journey for anyone to go through. But I mean, and I'm genuinely jealous of this now because I left religion like more than 20 years ago, and there are so many amazing resources now that didn't exist when I changed. And it's kind of, if you're looking for it and you know what to look for, it can really help you with that process.
Yeah. And by the way, Hammett not only left religion, but wrote a book about how he sold his soul on eBay. Tell everybody about that real quick. So they can go,
the short version is I basically visited a bunch of Christian churches saying, you know, I've never experienced this myself. I've heard about it. I mean, I live in America. I know what Christianity is like, but it's secondhand. And so I ended up visiting a whole bunch of mostly evangelical Christian churches, but different types, all black church, evangelical megachurch, house church. And a lot of them are promoting seeker services. A lot of them are specifically reaching out to atheists saying, we are doing this sermon for you. to bring you into the fold. So it's like, all right, well, I'm your target audience. I will go to your church. And yeah, I sold my soul on eBay is basically what I learned going to all these churches and whether any of them were convincing. And while I'm an atheist, that's not really a spoiler. Some of the things they do to try to draw you in is, I can see why it's compelling to so many people. And until you see that and you witness it firsthand, which, at least speaking for myself, I had not experienced it firsthand, you can see how tough it could be to leave any of those places too.
We got some more callers here today. Richard in California wants to talk about how water has a collective conscious.
Oh, this should be fun.
Well, welcome, Richard.
No, this won't be
How
fun
are
at
you?
all.
How you doing? Good.
Pretty good. I'm not aware that water has anything that could be conscious at all, let alone a collective conscious. So how do we get to there?
Dr. Iamoto was a physicist from Japan, and he wrote a book about it.
So what?
Okay. I have a pamphlet up here with all kinds of pseudoscience, batshit crazy stuff that people have written all the time. What I asked was, how do we get to demonstrate this? Not how did you hear about it?
Dr. Iamoto was it was given to me at the Theosophical Society in Ojai.
Still didn't answer the question. Gwyneth Paltrow has a whole website full of this type of stuff. It doesn't mean any of it's true. I mean, you can have people with degrees saying crazy things. It doesn't mean they're right.
Yeah, I'm only going to ask this one more time. How do we demonstrate that water has consciousness?
Okay, so water molecules look like snowflakes underneath the microscope. And there are all types of different patterns of snowflakes. And so his experiment was, he put a word next to a glass of water, put in like a turkey baster, pull out a sample of water, look underneath the microscope after about 5 minutes. And if it was a positive word, the snowflake was radiating and magnified and reaching for more light.
What?
And if you put a negative word next to the water,
you
put the look underneath the microscope after about 5 minutes. And if it was a positive word, the snowflake was radiating and magnified and reaching for more light.
The snowflake was radiating and magnifying and reaching for more light. What does that mean? The snowflake was magnifying. Don't understand what that means. I know what magnification is. Trust me. Don't understand that.
The snowflake was radiating and magnified and reaching for more light.
It was radiating. Okay, that sentence is just rubbish. It's like you've taken a sample of words from a dictionary and just let's shove them together. Let's say it with confidence and people will believe us. Okay, so I think that I don't know what Richard's talking about. There is no evidence that water has consciousness. That's absolute rubbish. But he's obviously read something that tweaks his particular version of whatever he believes, and he's going to run with it because he's read the book.
The snowflake was radiating and magnified and reaching for more light. And if you put a negative word next to the water, you put the turkey baster in, pull it out, look underneath the microscope, and the water molecules will be fractured.
Fresher.
I'm so
fresher,
curious what journal this was
the water
published.
molecules will be fresher. A water molecule is a water molecule. It's not fresher. It's not. It doesn't go off.
So the water was responding to the words.
Absolute rubbish.
You're talking about Dr. Emoto, right?
Dr. Iamoto, yes.
Yeah. Iamoto. Oh, I thought you were talking about Masaru Emoto.
Dr. Iamoto. He's dead now. So.
Okay. Well,
it'd be really cool to get him on the air and have a conversation with him, but
it would be really cool, except that I've heard this story before about water molecules and putting up words next to them, and when they freeze and they form certain crystals. My understanding is that this has been debunked as pseudoscience. Have there been any peer-reviewed studies that confirmed this at all?
The word you just used, pseudoscience?
Yes.
Chiropractic medicine falls underneath that.
I agree that
Yes.
a good chunk of chiropractic medicine falls underneath pseudoscience, and it should not be called medicine, and it should not be used for any treatment. I agree. Thank you.
Okay, I've got. I think I've got Moto. He's not a physicist. He was a Japanese businessman, author, and pseudoscientist who claimed that human consciousness could affect the molecular structure of water. And in his 2004 book, The Hidden Messages in Water, good grief, it was a New York Times bestseller. What on earth are people buying? Okay, and his, what does it say here? He graduated from Yokohama University after taking courses in international relations, not science, and certainly not physics. And it was apparently his work was brutally criticized by the scientific community. So yeah, I think the word rubbish pops into my head. Also junk.
Anything else? And it should not be called medicine, and it should not be used for any treatment. I agree. Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, so like Reiki,
Yep, Reiki is absolute bullshit. So is reflexology and a number of things. All of these things you're referencing are just as bullshit as water with consciousness.
But okay, so you're calling it bullshit, but you don't know that it's bullshit.
Oh, yes, I do. See,
yeah.
I know that it has absolutely continually failed to demonstrate any sort of efficacy. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not true, but when I say it's bullshit, what I mean is people keep claiming that it's real, and no one has been able to demonstrate that it can actually do what they say they can do. That's true for homeopathy, Reiki, etc.
I want to go back to my question. Where this guy publishes a book, anyone can publish a book. I say this as someone who has published a book. Where was this paper of his conscious water consciousness paper published? Yeah, who is looking at it? Who is giving it a stamp of approval here?
It's irrelevant.
Oh.
It's so not irrelevant.
It's really not.
Anyone can publish a book with any crap inside. There's entire businesses built on crap. But science, specifically, where's the peer review here?
Is it fiction?
Poor old Richard now is just going to look like an idiot, a complete and utter idiot, because he doesn't understand, or he's pretending not to understand, about the issue of something being peer reviewed. The idea that someone can print something or publish something, and that where was it reviewed, where was it published, is irrelevant. That's absolute rubbish. Of course it's not irrelevant, because you can literally publish anything you want. People may not buy it, but you can print it. If you want to pay for it, you can have it published, and that doesn't mean anything. If you're going to produce something that you expect people to start working with, then you're going to have to expect the fact that your peers will review you. And in science, that can be quite a brutal process. And I'm talking from experience.
Fiction or nonfiction? Is Lord of the Rings fiction or nonfiction?
Is what fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction or nonfiction?
There's a thing where your audio is ducking. So if you try to talk while I'm talking, I'm not going to hear a thing you say. What are you asking me, whether or not it's fiction or nonfiction?
Is Lord of the Rings fiction or nonfiction? I took you off speaker, so that takes away the echo.
Good. You should have never had me on speaker. I should hang up on you just for having me on fucking speaker. Lord of the Rings is fiction. What does that have to do with anything?
How could he ask that question? Is Richard more of an idiot than I thought he was? To ask whether Lord of the Rings is fact or fiction?
I guess it doesn't have anything. I guess it doesn't have anything to do with anything.
Wow,
we'll just move on to another
comment. Wow, that was weak,
right.
Richard.
Mark in California, thank you so much for waiting. You're on with him and Matt.
Hey guys, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
It says here that you believe everybody's going to hell who's not saved.
That's exactly right. But that's just what the screener wanted me to come up with a topic, and that's the first thing that came to my mind. I'll talk about anything you guys want to talk about. It's your show.
Cut him off.
No. I'm curious about that. So, I'd like to know. I guess the first question is, well, you say everybody's going to hell who's not saved. What must one do to be saved? How do we tell if somebody's saved?
Well, that's very simple. In the Bible, 1 Corinthians 15, 1 through 4 tells you that if you believe that Jesus died and shed his blood for your sins, and he was buried and was resurrected on the third day, and that this is what's written in Scripture, and you believe it, that's called faith. Faith in what you cannot see, faith in the gospel. And if you have that, then the Holy Spirit goes into you and you're saved. You're locked in for eternity. Nobody can take that away from you. That's born again.
Okay. So that's the category for who's going to hell or not. Are you okay with the idea that, for example, under your model, Mark, I'm not sure if I go to hell, because I was at one point a born-again Christian, and now, of course, I'm not. And I have pastor friends of mine who think that I'm still going to heaven because they believe once saved, always saved. And then I have other friends of mine who are pastors who think I'm going to hell. Just out of curiosity, best guess, what do you think? Am I going to hell?
How do you know that you are born again?
Well,
your testimony.
I was a sincere believer who turned over my life to Christ and believed the same thing. The people in my church thought that I was saved. I thought I was saved.
No, that doesn't make you.
Now, are you just gonna fucking interrupt me or not?
I'm sorry.
What I said was, I sincerely believed that I was born again, as did the people who were surrounded me. I know that's not proof, but there's no other way. There's no way for you to demonstrate that you're saved. There's no way for anyone to demonstrate that anybody's saved. And within Christianity, the notion that you could demonstrate your salvation to another human being is anathema, because only God knows whose names are written in the book of life, right?
That's not true. That is not true.
Oh.
You can know that you're saved. You can know that you're saved.
No. You're not listening. You're not listening, Mark. I said you cannot demonstrate it to another person.
If you don't believe in Scripture, you have no faith, and you're not saved. Period. That's how you're not saved.
Mark,
believe it.
Mark, how can you demonstrate? Man, it's like you don't even want to listen. How can you demonstrate to another person that you are saved?
All the talking, you don't give me.
Okay, if you're gonna fucking interrupt me every time I start a sentence, I'm gonna just hang up. I'm asking you a question. How can you demonstrate to someone else that you are saved?
I can demonstrate to myself that I am saved.
That's not my fucking question, Mark. That's what I say when I say you are not listening to me.
You will not listen to me. Let me talk without interrupting me.
Dickhead.
I tell you what, no, go away. You're not listening to me. Go rewind it. Listen, because you are not answering the question I asked. You are answering the question you wanted to answer. I said, how can you demonstrate to someone else that you are saved? And you wanted to talk about how you can prove it to yourself. I don't give a fuck how you can prove it to yourself. That's called self-deception. Goodbye.
I am amazed that a guy like that comes in without a question, just wants to proselytize. And that's the script he's working with. Like, in his head, he has to think, yep, this is gold. You've never heard this before. Let me tell you what it means to be saved. It's like, that. Why would you think that is convincing to anybody? You had a minute to talk. He did. And he used the same boring, stale, useless Christian script that so many people use. It's such a bad marketing campaign.
I had questions waiting. I wanted to know, A, how do you get saved? B, how can you know you're saved? B, C, how can you demonstrate that you're saved to somebody else? And then the most important question, does he think this is a good system? Because if he thinks I'm going to hell, is he okay with that? Am I deserving of it? Are we all deserving? There were lots of questions.
I would have also wanted to know how many other Christians he thinks who would also say they are saved are hellbound because they don't fit his definition of being saved. But like you said, you had a definition. You fit it. Yep. Many other Christians would say the same thing, and I have no doubt he thinks they're going to hell because they're not true believers. It goes into the whole no true Scotsman.
Questions to be asked to everybody. Using my words carefully to ask the question.
Why would
the real question?
Because let's.
There we go. Sharon in Illinois, you're on. Thank you for waiting.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hey.
Yeah, so I'm calling in because, I think from...
Okay, I don't think this is going to go well. Just throwing it out there. My instant gut feeling is that this is not going to go well. Let's see.
What I understand, a lot of atheists kind of look at it as the conscience is just being contained within the brain and operates like a wet robot, which you've probably heard a million trillion times. And I would like to ask how you think that conscience and reason can just be, come about with a bunch of chemicals, and how chemicals could have organized thought and reason.
Okay, I mean, basically, I'm not quite sure what Hemant and Matt are going to say, but there's an issue here which is quite an important issue for science, which is the place that I think Sharon is coming from. Is she's got a vision of the way that this something works. In part, it's probably because she's talking about consciousness. It's probably associated with the fact that she feels that it's this argument that there is consciousness in the universe. Where did the consciousness come from? It came from God. The reason that there is consciousness in the universe is because God has consciousness. Which is just such a crazy argument. But anyway, I think that what she's trying to do now is basically appeal to incredulity. How could we possibly get consciousness from a bunch of chemicals? How could we possibly start with, a universe that's just hydrogen, predominantly hydrogen and helium, with a snippet of lithium? And that somehow we'll get consciousness from that. Absolute rubbish. How could that? It's the argument of something coming from nothing. The easy answer actually is, I don't know. But religious people often hate that because they do know, because their answer is God. And of course this leads us to this argument of the God of the gaps, that basically when you look at the entirety of science, and science kind of has various explanations for things, there'll be bits like, let's say, consciousness. Where does it come from? That we don't have an answer for yet. So the answer is, I don't know. Well, that's God. Well, okay, so you don't know, so you're rubbish. Science is rubbish. That's God. That's evidence of God. And what happens is, as time moves forward, we have learnt more and more and more about the natural world around us, and those gaps have got smaller and smaller as we've learnt more, because we can explain things more now. And so the God of people like Sharon is hidden in the gaps that are just getting tighter and tighter and tighter as we shrink them out of existence. And theists don't seem to like the answer, I don't know. Somehow that is taken, the answer I don't know is taken as some kind of therefore your arguments are inferior and they are wrong, when actually the honest answer is I don't know. And scientists are allowed to say I don't know, and that's absolutely fine. It's just simply not an issue. Do you know what it means when we say we don't know? It means we don't know. Doesn't mean we'll never know. Doesn't mean then we tag team onto let's bring some magic into the picture, let's bring the supernatural. Doesn't mean that at all. It just means we don't know, and we're going to learn more as we go forward.
How chemicals could have organized thought and reason.
Okay, so what you're asking me is to prove that the consciousness is merely a product of a material brain?
Right.
I don't have to prove that it's merely a product of a material brain. It is, in fact, demonstrably a product of a material brain. If you think it's more or requires more than a material brain, then the burden of proof is on you to demonstrate that. I'm not asserting that there isn't something more. My position is that until such time as you've demonstrated that there is something more, I don't have a good reason to believe there's something more. It doesn't matter whether we have an explanation for consciousness. It doesn't matter whether we know how chemicals in a brain result in consciousness at all. We could be completely ignorant about, we could not even know that there is a brain. But if your view is that the material can't do it on its own, you have to demonstrate that and show what more there is.
Well, you know, I think the
like
conscience is obviously stumped many scientists, and they haven't absolutely been able to prove how chemicals can actually develop intelligent thoughts.
But you're not going after what he's saying. It's stumped them because they haven't figured out the mechanism. It hasn't stumped them because they think there's something supernatural at play here.
Well, you can label it as supernatural, or you can label it as fact.
No. That's not even close to a dichotomy. Yes, it's true. You could label it supernatural, or you could label it as fact. I wish that was a dichotomy. I wish it was the best. That would be the best dichotomy ever. There's facts, and then there's bullshit. So here's the thing: the fact that scientists don't have a good understanding and an explanation for consciousness does not mean that it's reasonable to conclude there must be something more than the material. That's you have to demonstrate. How can you demonstrate that, Sharon?
Well, it's not reasonable to believe that chemicals can think.
But you think
Sharon, are you ever going to answer the question that you've actually been asked, or are you going to keep deflecting with bullshit?
Well, first of all, I don't talk bullshit.
You are.
That doesn't describe an intelligent conversation.
You're not having an intelligent conversation. I've pointed out where the burden of proof rests, and you are basically saying that because scientists haven't been able to explain this, therefore it's reasonable to conclude that there's something more than the material. And I'm explaining to you that that is not actually a reasonable conclusion.
Well, I don't think any of us can totally conclude, because you can't put your hands on consciousness.
You're not listening.
You can touch. I am listening, but
all right. You are not thinking. Because I didn't see whether or not you can touch consciousness is irrelevant. Whether or not you can completely or absolutely conclude anything is irrelevant. Neither of those things have anything to do with what I said. Here's what I said, Sharon. Let me make this really easy. How can you demonstrate that consciousness requires something more than the material?
How can anybody demonstrate that it doesn't?
Goodbye, you dishonest interlocutor. You refuse to answer the question. I pointed out before that nobody is claiming that it doesn't. Nobody's demonstrating that it doesn't. For you to come back and say, well, you can't prove it's material only, is irrelevant. That is a shifting of the burden of proof. If you think it's more than material, then you have to demonstrate that. And what you've just done is admitted that you can't, because instead you tried to shift the burden of proof again.
That I can. I started out saying that I can't, but what I am saying is, if you're professing certain things, if you're professing that God doesn't exist, if you're
that's not what I'm professing, Sharon. If you would ever, I'm going to shut up and let Hemet take this, because if you would ever fucking listen, you would stop misunderstanding and misrepresenting everything in the reverse.
Well, I don't think fucking is what we're doing here. That's not even an intelligible.
All right, you pedantic, obnoxious person. We're not fucking. You and I are definitely not fucking, Sharon. Was that confusing for you?
Right, and God help us.
But do you understand that there's a colloquial use of the word fucking where it is used as an interjection?
I'm aware of how people distort language. Absolutely.
No, not distort language. Language is our plaything. You see, I get to say fuck as much as I want, and I can tell you to fucking go away.
I can't believe I just got invited to a non-threesome.
I know. Hey, Hemet and I aren't fucking, and me and the caller aren't fucking. Nobody's doing it. It's weird. So back to the issue. Maybe we just. I am going to take more calls. But it's like, this is so frustrating. I literally just got done saying, please answer the question
muted.
that I asked. And instead, what we get is another shifting the burden of proof. I don't think atheists can prove that consciousness is merely material. Correct. We can't. So what? I don't know.
He's muted. He's muted. He's muted.
Lucifer.
You're on with Hemet Meta.
No, what's going on, bro?
Oh, we're just waiting.
Oh, I just want to talk about Lucifer.
Okay.
All right, I got a quote here from... let me pull it up.
I think Hammond is still muted.
I got a quote here from Kanye West, quoting, I sold my soul to the devil. I know it's a crappy deal, but at least it came with a few toys like a Happy Meal. Another quote from Eminem. I sold my soul to the devil. I'm going to hell. I headed to hell. I want the money, the women, the...
Yeah, okay. So he's quoting lyrics.
Fortune and the fame. That means I'll end up burning in hell, scorching in flames.
Leo.
Leo.
Also want to talk about... Hey, hello? Yes?
Is it possible that somebody said they sold their soul to the devil and actually did not sell their soul to the devil?
I mean, is it possible? Yeah, but if you're famous, why would you want to talk about religion? I mean, you're already famous. You already made it. You already disproved.
Man,
Christian.
Leo, if you just answer the question that asked, things would go a lot easier. Is it possible that someone might say that they sold their soul to the devil when they didn't?
Well, you didn't listen to the words I said. If you listened to what I said,
Leo?
Yes, it is possible.
Yes, and you kept talking after that. See, I asked a yes or no question, and you said yes, and then you went on to something that was secondary irrelevant. Here's the follow-up question. If it's possible for someone to say that they sold their soul to the devil when they didn't really, how do you tell the difference between who sold their soul to the devil and who didn't? Hey, Hemmett's back.
Can you tell the difference? I mean, if you're going to be under Lucifer's control and he wants nothing but to drag people down to hell, why would people who sold their soul and allegiance to them
Leo, are you going to answer the question that I asked you?
You're not allowed to talk about that.
Are you going to answer the question that I asked you?
I got disconnected for a good second, and now I just chimed in, and I have no idea what the hell he's talking about. So maybe I didn't miss anything.
You didn't. Leo, how do you tell the difference between someone who really sold their soul to the devil and someone who didn't?
You can't. You can't.
Okay, if you can't tell the difference, then that means you have no way to identify if anyone has ever sold their soul to the devil, right?
Okay, what does that have to do with anything?
If you have no way to show that anybody's ever sold their soul to the devil, then the conversation is useless. Because if you can't show that someone actually did sell their soul to the devil, then for all you know, nobody has ever sold their soul to the devil.
That contradicts what people are saying. Why would someone sing a song saying "I sold my soul to the devil"? That doesn't
because it's amusing. Because it's amusing. Because it's a story. Because it builds a legend. It builds a reputation. Because people don't believe in the devil. I've said I've sold my soul to the devil. Fucking Hemmett sold his soul on eBay.
The devil didn't go down to Georgia either.
Yeah.
Man, you are a fool. Look at Luke 10.
I'm a fool. I'm a fool. I'm a fool. Leo, I'm a fool. How am I a fool?
Well, let's talk about Pope Francis then. Pope Francis has a video on YouTube talking about he's the man of sin. It's a 7.45. It's 7 minutes and 45 seconds. If you'd watch it, he'd explain himself. The Pope of Francis would explain himself that he's talking about dragging people to hell and giving them the mark of the beast. Why would Pope Francis say something like that, bro?
I don't give a fuck why Pope Francis says anything. Is it possible that Pope Francis doesn't know what he's talking about and isn't telling the truth? How am I a fool just because you can't stay on topic?
How? What? First off, man, I know who you are, too.
Who am I?
Who you are.
Who am I?
You're Lilith reincarnated. That's what you are.
Awesome.
Lilith reincarnated.
Nice.
Awesome. Does that mean I'm trans?
Yeah,
'Cause
Leo's a complete and utter idiot. So can we move forward because he's just a complete dick.
King James Version, sons and daughters. You think people actually lived 800 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's
Well,
got.
That's
all
something
of
you can't demonstrate, which is absolutely antithetical.
Yeah, Leo is just a complete.
Promoted a world.
So we'll move on from that because there's not going to be anything sensible coming from Leo.
Yeah.
Because he's a dick.
Binding of Isaac earlier, and I was playing as Lilith. So when he first said I was Lilith, I thought he was just joking.
Yeah.
Please.
All right.
Leo.
So we
never
have
call again.
a call from, is it Sohaib in Canada? I apologize if I mispronounced that.
Yes, speaking, yes.
Hi,
Hey,
you're on with Matt and Hemmett. How are you?
Good, good. How are you doing?
Good. What's your question?
Yeah, I just have a question about the afterlife. Like, I'm a Muslim, so we believe that there's like a heaven and a hell. And what are your thoughts on the concept of a hell in Islam? What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's as fictional as the Christian version of the same thing. If there's no proof of it, this is the life we have. Make the most of it. Do you have any reason to think otherwise?
Yes, because you see, don't you think it's a better option?
All right, I'm just going to pause here for a second and just say it is my experience from watching these programs and other similar types of program that when Muslims call in and give arguments, the Muslim argument is normally unbelievably weak. Now, that's not meant to be an attack on, Islam is worse than Christianity. That is not what I mean. In most countries that are Islamic, you don't have the same level, if any, of what the West would call freedom of speech. You cannot stand up, on the street and start preaching about the fact that you think that religion is rubbish and there's no such thing as a God, blah, 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 blah. If you did that in an Islamic country, you would get in trouble. I mean, you might get put in jail. You cannot attack their religious leaders, not physically, of course, but I mean, you can't challenge them intellectually. And so my experience is that a lot of Islamic, I'm desperate not to say fundamentalists because of course that's not what I really mean. A lot of Islamic preachers will give forward their view, but they're not used to it being challenged because people are afraid to challenge them. Whereas when they come onto this show, they are, and then they're shown to be pretty weak. I mean, this may not be, but that's typically the way it goes. I'm just going to restart this. Not restart it, but
Do you have any reason to think otherwise?
Yes, because you see, don't you think it's a better option that you can just believe in it because it's a very the fire of hell is 70 times hotter than the earth.
Is that are you saying you are a better person because you believe in that and it's stopping you from doing things?
Yeah, yes.
What is it stopping you from doing? Like if you suddenly doubted hell, what is it that you would start doing?
Anything that's because there's no God to punish me.
You know neither of us believe in hell, right?
Yeah, I know.
So what is it that we are doing that you think is awful?
Well, you don't believe that Allah exists.
Correct, but I don't see how that's hurting anybody.
Right.
I mean, if you stopped believing in Allah tomorrow, would you just run around murdering people and stealing things?
No, but I wouldn't see any consequences of doing that. So
you wouldn't see consequences of murdering people?
Yeah. Yes. Like
You don't think that the consequences are that person is dead and you have hurt another person and there may be consequences for you legally as well? And that if you promoted a world where people could just run around killing each other, without any consequences, that world would be worse than a world where there are consequences for it?
Okay, yeah, I get what you're saying. I totally get that. I agree with you, but I'm just saying, like, it's basically in my religion, you see, God, He gives you everything, and then you have to appreciate Him for what He gave you. So
I don't have any evidence that God has given me anything. I don't have any evidence that there is a God, and I certainly have no evidence that God has given me anything. What has God given me? What can you prove that God gave to me?
Your life.
You can't prove that God gave me life.
Water and...
You can't prove that God gave me water. These are things you believe. These are things you've been told. How do you demonstrate that God gave me life?
It's not possible for it to come from nowhere. It just has to come from somewhere. Like something created.
Where are you getting that information from? That you think it couldn't have arisen in any other way, therefore your interpretation, Allah had to do it, the Quran has that in writing somewhere. Like, where are you jumping from, I don't know where it came from, therefore my religion has the right answer to it?
Here's a weird question. Do you think that Munkar and Nakir are going to ask you easier questions than we are? Or Nakir?
I can't tell if we lost him or if he's just quiet.
Oh, we lost him.
All right.
So one of the things is that in his...
Stunningly unimpressive. As I said, it's just another example. People who are Islamic are not used in general, not used to having their ideas challenged in the way that Christians end up getting challenged. And they're just arguments, they're just stunningly weak. I mean, and that's not meant in any way to suggest they're unpleasant, horrible people, of course. That's not the point at all. They're just not used to it. It's actually quite sad that they're not used to that. They need to be challenging their views purely as an attempt to try and get things right.
Islamic afterlife, there's this notion that there's two angels, I think it's Munkar and Nakir, who will like interview to test the faith of the Muslim in question. I don't know that much about it, but if you can't answer, if you don't have answer,
God wasn't
dealing with people who don't care about their beliefs being true. How you doing, Tanner?
Hi, I'm doing well, Matt. Thanks, Emmett.
Yeah.
I appreciate you waiting. Go ahead.
Of course, yeah. Just a little background, really quick. I am a foreman. I got that term from you, Matt. I think it's better than ex-Mormon. So
I like it.
And I've been having, it's good. I've been having some conversations with family lately, and talking to my dad, I realized, and he fully admits this too, that he does not care whether or not his beliefs are true. That just isn't something that matters to him at all. And so I don't know how to move forward with other types of conversations about religion with him, because he just admits that he doesn't care. So I'm wondering if either of you have any thoughts on how to try and progress forward in that type of a conversation.
Can I ask, Tanner, how old are you?
I'm 28.
So, I mean, are you living outside the house? Are you on your own?
Oh, yeah. No, I have my own house. I'm married. We have a kid. And so it's just we live nearby and we see each other frequently.
I mean, the answer that I would have is I don't necessarily know that that's a conversation or an argument or a debate that I would necessarily want to have, because, again, if I'm thinking to my own parents who are religious, I don't think reason or logic is going to convince them to change their minds on it.
My parents pretend.
And also, I don't necessarily know that I care about that debate, that I really want them to change their minds. Like, I do plenty of stuff trying to convince people to leave religion, but none of it specifically targeted at my own parents. And I guess my question is, I get that your father isn't really he doesn't really have a grounding necessarily in his faith that has to do with whether it's true or not. But also, why is it important for you that he either change his mind on it or get a firmer foundation, I guess, for lack of better words?
Yeah. Mormonism, and I'm sure this is in other religions as well, but Mormonism really goes hard on demonizing people who leave. And it just makes me uncomfortable that his religion demonizes me in that type of a way. And I really want to be able to have good conversations with him. And I'm not trying to talk him out of religion or faith.
I would argue that if you really, really want to go for it, which I would argue is not a good idea, because we're all allowed to believe what we want to believe, and we don't have to have someone hassling us to try and convince us otherwise. But if you really want to go for it, then work on the basis that is it important that what you believe is true or not? Use that as the basis. You don't have to go for religion. You can go for all sorts of things. There's lots and lots of examples of decisions that we make in our life based on an idea of some kind of judgment, a judgment call that this is better than that one, and therefore I'm going to buy this one. And you can have conversations then about, well, what if you're wrong? How important is it? If you want to make a decision between two situations, you want to buy this bit of kit or this bit of kit, and you have a need for the kit. So a lawnmower, you're going to buy a lawnmower, and there's these two different ones, and they're different, and they're different prices, but you want to get the best one. Your criteria is, I need the best one for me. Then basically you can have a conversation about, well, how important is it to get the decision right? How important is it that your view of the situation after you've judged it is the right decision? How important is it that what you believe about your choices is right or not? There's lots of different ways of having that conversation. And if you can have that conversation about lots and lots of different things other than religion, you can slide then religion into it. And it would be a strange kind of person that would basically say, well, yeah, it's important that what I believe is right. Yep, it's important that what I believe is right. Yep, it's important. And they're in that position. And then when it comes to religion, no, that's not important whether I'm right or not. That would just be a really unusual thing to do. So if you really do want to kind of make traction with that particular area, then that might be a way of doing it. But I think that ultimately, even if the Mormon religion is really sort of negative, like Jehovah's Witnesses are, really negative about people who leave the religion, then so not worth it. Walk away.
Is there anything? He makes, in my conversations with him, I feel like I am the crazy one for caring about what's true, because it's just he just does not care, and so I'm happy to just leave the conversation alone. It's just crazy.
Tanner, he does care. He's lying. Everybody cares. Ask him if he gets in his car, does he care whether or not it's true that his brakes are working? Ask him if he crosses the street, does he care whether or not it's true, whether or not there's a bus coming? Ask him if you can borrow $20,000 at 40% interest and whether or not he cares if you're ever going to pay it back. He cares about the truth.
Yeah.
And so ask him then, once you get him to acknowledge that he does care about the truth, because he absolutely does, how is it that he can care about the truth for something trivial and something important, but not for the most important thing in his life, which is whether or not there's a God and whether or not there's an afterlife, whether or not what he must do to be saved, what he must do to earn the favor of the God that he believes in? How could he possibly care more about the truth of the brakes on his car than he does about a God? He's lying.
How does it affect your life? I mean, like, does it affect his relationship with you and your children?
I mean, it does to an extent. Mormon is very, very family-oriented, very intensive on shaming people that leave, that type of thing. My family has been really great. Otherwise, I just like to have these types of conversations and he just can't get past the fact that he doesn't care if his church is true or not. But it sounds like it's either kind of go with what Matt said on asking him about other things that he care about is true or not, or just where I have been lately is just leave the conversation alone and don't bring it up. And I'm fine with that as well. I was just wondering if there is a way to move forward past that.
That's the best way I can think of. Show him that he does care about the truth, and then get him to acknowledge that what he really wants, as far as I can tell, is to not have to talk and justify his religion. He doesn't want to have to defend his religion to anybody else. And that's a different thing than whether or not he cares whether or not it's true. And once he says that, the second he says he doesn't want to talk or defend his religion, you have to drop it. Because it's not your job to fix him. And you don't get to force people to give an explanation for what they believe. I don't make outgoing calls here. I don't force someone to call in or defend anything. You call in if you want to. Your dad's the person who never wants to call into this show.
And the fact that Mormonism especially, but when you're in a religion that demands so much of its followers too, it's kind of hard to imagine he doesn't care about this thing that really does take over your life in so many ways.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
And I apologize, Tanner, but I got to let you go. We're over time. There's like 2 more calls I want to try and get to real quick. But that's the best advice we're going to have for your dad. And just keep loving your dad and cut him some slack to the biggest extent you can.
Perfect. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Tanner.
I got 2 more calls I want to try to get to because they've been waiting a very long time. And we're going to start with the one who's been waiting longest, and that's Brian in New Zealand. Thank you so much for your patience. Hopefully this is something I can knock out really quickly.
G'day, Matt. G'day, Hemant. How are you?
Hello.
Cheers.
Yeah. G'day. Yeah, it should be a reasonably quick one. I was listening to Talk Heathen a couple of months ago now, and there was a caller who called in, and his claim for the proof of God was that without God, there could be no free will. And he did a pretty poor job of arguing it. But it hit with me right, and I was thinking about it. And it occurs to me, and I guess I just sort of wanted to see what your thoughts were. It's not something I've ever heard discussed on the show, but it's probably something you've heard before. But it seems to me that if there's an omniscient God who knows absolutely everything, even before I'm born, every decision I'll ever make and everything I'll ever do, then I can't possibly have free will, right? Because anything I do, he already knows.
No.
Right? So I'm driving along the road and I could turn right or left, but God already knows I'm going to turn left, right?
Yeah, no, Brian. So the only, in order for there for God's knowledge to contravene your free will, it has to be a situation where God knew everything, could have picked to create a different world, and picked and created this world. So God had to create this world knowing everything you were going to do. That means that there's no free will, and that is the model of the God of classical theism. Merely the fact that God knows it doesn't mean that you still didn't have free will, because you're still the one doing the choosing, and really what you have is someone knowing what's going to happen, but that doesn't necessarily impact your free will. And if God created this universe, but this was the only universe that he created, it basically could still be entirely deterministic, where God isn't superseding your free will. He's just aware of it, like someone who watched a pre-recorded TV show. But if God picked this universe instead of a different one, and he picked the universe in which you turned left instead of turning right, then you definitely don't have free will.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Both answers.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that was really. I just, it's just something that's kind of been sitting a bit wrong with me, and I've been trying to, it seems to me that I'm a puppet and God can see the strings, right? But that's the.
Okay, I just want to make a quick comment here about free will. The issue of whether we do or don't have free will is a bit of an issue on the web. If you look it up, you'll see that people argue. One of the basic arguments for the fact that we don't have free will is the idea that when you have to make a decision, so free will becomes important here. Which choice do I have? You have a bunch of choices. You have to make a decision. The particular decision that you make is effectively a piece of biochemistry associated with the particular state of the brain at that moment in time. All of the things that you know, all the things that you are thinking about. If you could bottle that down, or whittle that down to basically the biochemical state of your brain, then you're about to make a decision and the biochemistry moves forward. And if you repeated that, and you could be in exactly the same situation, you would produce exactly the same outcome. If you could make your brain be in exactly the same state with the same knowledge, absolutely everything the same, and you had to make the same decision, you would make the same decision. That argument is basically part of the argument of there's no such thing as free will, and there is just, you know, biochemistry. I actually don't believe that. One, because you can't prove it. But that's not why I don't believe it. The reason that I don't accept it is because of quantum physics. Quantum physics allows conditions to be set up, and the outcome will be a probability of the different outcomes. Now, there's two basic interpretations of quantum physics. There are others, but there are two main ones. One is called the Copenhagen interpretation, where in a given situation, let's suppose we had to make a decision, there will be a bunch of options for us, and each one of those will have a probability, and it's almost then like we just roll dice to see which probability it pops up at, and that's the action that we take, that's the decision that we take. This was the thing that where Einstein allegedly said, you know, God doesn't throw dice. He didn't like that. Now, the alternative interpretation, that is like the big one, is the many worlds interpretation, which basically is really weird. And the many worlds interpretation really throws, well, I suppose quantum physics in itself throws a spanner in the works of cause and effect. They change what we mean by the words cause and effect. In the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics, you're in a situation where you have to make a decision, and each one of those decisions has a probability. That's the same as the Copenhagen interpretation, but the difference here is in the many worlds interpretation, they all occur. And our perception of what happens, what we see happen, is the way that we interpret the fact that they all happened, which is a very strange idea, and it kind of turns on its head this idea of cause and effect. Cause, to make something happen, no longer means the same thing as it did, you know, a minute ago. So I think the probabilistic aspects of quantum physics, where you can set up a state and that state will not necessarily then produce the same outcome because of probability, means that effectively, but it requires you to redefine what free will means. If I redefine free will as that aspect of a probabilistic system that comes out when the probabilities are interpreted, whichever quantum physics system is the right system, that's what I'm calling free will, and that happens. So you would not necessarily in the same state get the same outcome. That's what I am referring to as free will. Now, most of the time that's not what people are thinking about as free will, but most people aren't thinking about quantum physics. And most people, their definition of free will does lead them down a route of there is no such thing as free will. So let's carry on, because we're close to the end of the program, and it is 19 minutes past midnight in the UK.
I'm trying to, you know, it seems to me that I'm a puppet and God can see the strings, right? But that's the only that's the closest thing to free will.
You are on with Matt and Hammett. Matt,
I think this is probably the last one.
Hey man, how you doing? Hey Hammett. First I want to say, Hammett, I love your. I'm sorry if I'm saying the name wrong. I love your videos on Genesis.
Oh, thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, they therapy to me.
Okay.
With you, Matt, I just want to say, like, I grew up in a family, Christians, evangelists, bishops, even my friends who don't go to church, they believe in God. And several years ago, I started finding your videos, and the questions I used to have that these pastors used to try to answer, they just didn't make sense. You had the same questions, and you would answer them, and it just gave me therapy.
So, awesome. I'm glad it was helpful.
Both of you guys.
How can we help today?
But here's where you can help me at. So I'm raising a child. I got everybody around me believing in God. I don't even know what to tell my daughter sometimes. And I still hold on to a little bit of belief in God, because my aunt, who recently passed away, she was like only a couple of years older than me. She used to talk about the end of the world and the mark of the beast, and one day it's going to be a worldwide catastrophe and the world was going to be in chaos. And after she passed away, COVID-19 happened, and just all the things she used to say, I kind of see them. I don't know if it's in my head or not, like they kind of coming to pass. And that one little string makes me still hold on that it maybe is possible with some type of God out there. So that's my part question.
Is your question how to deal with your daughter, or how to make sense of your aunt's predictions, if you will?
Both.
I mean, in terms of the prediction, COVID is obviously bad, but there are always tragedies that are happening everywhere at all times. I mean, if not COVID, you could point to climate change as an existential crisis. You could point to earthquakes, hurricanes, tsunamis, what have you. So COVID is definitely in our face and unique. But I don't know that doesn't necessarily mean that your aunt or the end times predictions called that into question or saw that coming from a mile away. They didn't. They did not predict COVID from a mile away. So I don't buy that she was onto something with her beliefs. So I wouldn't put much stock in that. In terms of raising your daughter, how old is your daughter?
8.
8. So she's at an age when she's going to start asking questions and start thinking about some of this stuff. And I'm only saying this as someone who has 2 kids, both of whom are younger than she is. But I genuinely think the best way to handle her when she's talking about this stuff is not to tell her God exists or God doesn't exist. It is to get her to question this stuff. Ask her what she thinks about this. If you are an atheist or pretty close to it, and she says, I think heaven exists, I think God exists, the best question you could ask her is like the annoying kid question of why? Why do you believe that stuff? Or why do you think there's something up there? What about people who don't think there's something up there? Where do you think these good people go? Bad people? I mean, make her think about this stuff if she's raising questions about it, or if she says to you, I believe in this thing that you know is wrong. Just get her thinking about it. I think it would be wrong for me to teach my kids God doesn't exist. People who believe in God are wrong. It's almost unfair for me to feed them the answers like that, and it's not going to stick. I genuinely think the best thing you could do is get her to start thinking about this stuff and ask her probing questions. That's a good thing, because you're not telling her.
What I've been doing, and tell me if you agree with this or not, I have been saying this is what I was taught, and I'll tell her what they taught me, and then I'll say, I'm not sure if it's true, but when you get older, you have to find out for yourself.
I think that's a wonderful answer. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful answer. And by the way, especially like I think you said, you're surrounded by people in your family, in your community who are super religious. I think it is going to be important for her to understand what it is all these other people believe, whether or not she ever goes along with it. But I think that's a great thing that you're asking her to say, look, at some point you're going to have to figure this out for yourself. I'll love you no matter what you choose. But yeah, it is helpful to say this is what these other people believe. Maybe this is why they believe it. I don't personally believe it. It's going to be your decision. But I think the better thing to do is just make sure she's always asking questions, that there isn't like she's going to be surrounded by people who tell her there's one right answer to this stuff, and it's not the right answer. Mm-hmm. And I think just to remind her that no, there are lots of people who think very differently about these things, and no one gets to force their beliefs on you. You're going to have to figure this out. And by the way, there's no deadline for this. It's not a class project. You can think about this stuff for the rest of your life. And you know what? If there's a book you like or YouTube videos you like, great. You can always point her in that direction too. But again, just get her to question, and don't tell her she's, not that you're doing this, but don't tell her she's right about it or wrong about it, especially if she says something like, I don't think God exists. I don't think you should tell her, good, you figured it out. Like, let her keep questioning, let her figure this stuff out on her own, and let her know that she can always come to you if she has those questions, because like there are going to be maybe even pastors in her life where she won't feel comfortable if she has doubts going to them, but she should feel comfortable going to you if she has doubts, or if she starts to think God does exist. Hopefully she sees you as someone safe who she could talk to about this stuff.
Okay. I guess my problem was I didn't want people demonizing her, saying she's living in darkness or she's a sinner and all this stuff if she took on the beliefs that I had. So I kind of wanted to, like, I tell her like it's a Santa Claus, or she's about to come out of that stage. But, believing in tooth fairies and all that kind of stuff, should I go ahead and promote Christianity while she's young and then later tell her? That's where I was drawing the confusion part apart.
No, let her know where these people are coming from. It's unfair that they very well may tell her she's going to hell if she raises these doubts. But I think it's important to let her know, look, you got to keep questioning this. You got to figure it out. There are going to be people she encounters who feel like they are 100% dead set. They got the right answer on this stuff. And they're going to treat her as if she might have the wrong answer. And let her know that's not okay. She could push back against it if that's the case. But questioning this stuff is important, and to do what you might see on a show like this one, which is ask the questions right back to those people who seem so sure about it. The demonization is not okay, and I don't know what you can do to stop that, but to teach her that I don't think it is worthwhile to teach her Christianity is true only to take that back later. I don't know that you can undo that later on. But to let her know this is what a lot of people believe, and you should understand where they're coming from when they say things like this, but it doesn't mean they're right. But you could tell her, this is where I'm coming from on this. These are the questions I asked. But the better thing you could do is get her to know what type of questions to ask. How do you treat people with kindness? Because these people who are demonizing her are not.
Yeah. I have nothing to add to that, William. I'll just say I agree. And thank you for calling, and hope that helps. And call us back and let us know, how things are going.
Good luck to you.
All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate the help. Thank you.
Absolutely. That will bring us to an end of this episode of the Atheist Experience. I had a lot of fun, but maybe I had too much fun, because in hindsight, I'm sad. I'm sad that religion has turned a caller into someone who's so terrified of conversation and reality that they think I am Lilith or Satan. I'm sad that in order to keep beliefs sacred, people can't listen to the question that they're asked or answer the question that they're asked. Religions put up barriers to thinking. My friend, or our friend, Seth Andrews, famously did a talk about wearing his God glasses. And that really is what's going on. As soon as they fit you with your God glasses, there's a protective barrier to what you can actually see.
To the point where it's affecting someone's daughter who hasn't made up her mind on this stuff.
Right. At the beginning, we were asked if there was real, measurable, positive things coming from our work. The real good, in my opinion, is helping people remove those glasses and encouraging them to be good and do good for goodness sake, not because some God expects it or wants you to. The measurable part is in how many people's lives are changed, how many people are giving up old notions of God, and in studies that measure societal health versus religiosity. We've been pointing to some of those studies, including one from Gregory S. Paul, for over a decade or more now. There's not only miracles that decline as our ability to investigate them increases, but our solutions to problems increase as we give up the notion that a God can or will intervene. Humanism is not, there is no God. It is, we are here and have to solve problems on our own to the best of our understanding. Humanism, skepticism, atheism. I want to thank Habit Meta for joining me here this week. Please be sure and check out the Friendly Atheist blog and his videos as well. Thanks to the crew who will pop their name up right after you guys get a good look at those links there. And thanks to all of you who tuned in, who contributed, who donated, who commented and added to this conversation, including the people who called in. We'll see you next week. Please stay safe, take care of each other.
Okay, and I'm pausing there for the issues that I mentioned at the beginning, and I would echo what Matt has just said and say basically be happy, stay safe, be kind to your parents. When you get the opportunity, make sure you get vaccinated. It's important. And I hope you have a great week. I'm going to stop the stream now. Take care. Be happy.